Welcome to this episode of Charging the Agency Frontier. Today I'll be interviewing Kristen Ruby of Ruby Media Group, an award-winning PR and social media agency that helps companies increase their exposure through leveraging social media and digital PR. Kristen is a friend, fellow YEC member, thought leader. I see her all the time on Fox News, CNBC, Good Morning America, countless other networks. She practices what she preaches. I'm excited about our conversation today on PR, from discussing do-it-yourself PR to evaluating PR results, to looking at the biggest PR mistakes that companies make. We're going to cover a lot of ground today. But Kristen, before we get started, before we jump in, can you give us a little more color on who you are and kind of where you came from and life story in a nutshell?
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here today with you to do this. So I have been doing public relations for over 12 years now. I went to Boston University's College of Communications. I majored in public relations there. I had 13 internships by the time I graduated, a lot of different experience in all facets of the communications
13
industry.
internships?
Yeah, I
Wow.
interned a lot. And so, basically I started my company when I graduated. So directly, from there, which is sort of an interesting.
Well, you had worked at 13 companies. So.
Yeah, I did. I did. And so I leveraged that experience that I had and a lot of stuff that I know, really self-taught. And I'm a firm believer that other people should sort of do the same. And I started out just primarily doing social media, and then I expanded to full service public relations. And so I've seen the industry change so much since I started out. Right. So I started out and it was sort of the wave of social media, and it was like this new hot thing. Now, of course, here we are many years later and everyone's doing it, and it's evolved and changed. And so during that time, we've also seen public relations as a field change dramatically, even more so than social media, I would say. Right. So when I started out, it was still more traditional PR. And now we've seen that change go to way on the other end of digital public relations. And so I'm not sure if people understand the difference of traditional PR versus digital PR. Is that something you'd want me to share?
Yeah.
So traditional PR, when people think of traditional PR, they think of a publicist and their, Rolodex. We call them like a magic Rolodex of contacts where they would just go through them and call them. And that's how the industry works. Of course, that's really not how it's right. And so today it's one is about relationships, but it's also about this shift of what I'd call proactive PR to reactive PR. So proactive PR is more traditional, where you would outbound pitch people based on other things they had previously written and saying, would you be interested in covering this story? Now, with the advent of technology and things like Harrow or any of these other outlets like ProfNet or anything like that, it's reactive PR. I mean, that's the way that I practice PR. Not everyone does this way, but where a journalist is telling you, this is what we're working on. Do you have a source for this story? And so from my experience, I've seen just the success rate become so much higher practicing reactive PR versus what I'd call proactive PR. Because proactive PR, you're pitching something in which they may or may not ever be covering, as opposed to reactive, where you're pitching based on what they're writing. So again, traditional, you think also more print publications, magazines, anything like that. Digital is going to be all online. And of course, there's an SEO boost with digital PR as well, which is critical.
And you started with social and then moved to PR, which is, I think, pretty uncommon. I mean, usually it's starting with PR and moving to social and influencer marketing and some of these other areas. How does that perspective kind of shape your perspective?
Well, that's a great question. You're right. I do think it's probably typically the other way around. And so, but what I guess what I realized is a lot of the social media I was doing this whole time really was PR. And I guess maybe I didn't realize that when I started out, but so much of what I was doing, and it's so funny because I have clients that say, you do so much more than social media. Like you're the face of social media in these ads or these other things. They're like, but you get us on these major outlets, or you do all this other stuff where you get us written about. Then they're like, that's not social media. That's well beyond that. That's PR. And so, that's been interesting for me to sort of look at that evolution as well.
Well, let's dive right in. First thing I wanted to talk about today was kind of these DIY, do-it-yourself PR courses. Are they worth their weight? Are they a waste of time and money? You would be somebody that would know.
Yes. So I think a lot of them, listen, I think sometimes people have good intentions of making these do-it-yourself PR courses because they want to make PR available to the masses, and not everyone can afford an agency retainer of thousands of dollars a month. So maybe you could buy a course or an ebook for $99. I don't know. I put out 2 ebooks. I make them free on our site. I don't charge for them. So that's my experience. If you want to, help people learn this stuff, I suppose you could do it that way. However, I think do-it-yourself PR can be very problematic and can come with a lot of challenges because people, the media it's not like making a marketing mistake. Like when you make a PR mistake, it can cost you. It can cost you can have a legal war over it. People don't understand, like they see things on TV and go, oh, off the record really means XYZ. Like they just don't understand, or they'll say something they shouldn't say because no one's really properly media trained them. And then it comes out and they go, and they'll start going to the journalist, can you remove that, right? These are the types of horror stories you see of people who try and do it their own PR who don't really have an understanding for the profession or the craft, right? I always say there's an art to doing PR right. And so it's not just people see the new technology today, right? Like they think PR is just tarot. No, that's just one component of media relations. There's so much more to it. And even within that, like there's 20 emails that go back and forth to get a one-line quote in any of these outlets today. It's a ton of work. And, when people do their own PR, they also drop the ball a lot of the times. So maybe, for example, they'll write up a great answer. But then what happens when the outlet comes back and says, well, we have follow-up questions? Sometimes these are the same people that don't answer them on deadline. And then their, entire quote gets cut. So, again, I just see a lot of sort of missteps happening when people try and do their own PR because they're not properly trained.
So the next question then would be, do you think people can learn to do their own PR, public relations, without hiring a PR firm? Or can they do if we're talking about a mid-sized brand or an emerging brand, is that something that the marketing director can, basically add to their list of things to do is the PR components, or is that just unrealistic and setting yourself up for failure?
I think it's unrealistic. And I think there's a very sort of strange double standard here. So we see it a lot with marketing directors and CMOs versus PR people. So when you have PR people always say to those PR professionals, what's the ROI of this, or how many new leads did this bring in, or all of these sort of marketing driven questions that are then thrust on the PR professional. I don't see the same thing happening the other way around, right? So you don't see people rarely ask the marketing director, can you do PR? Most of the time, the marketing director will say, no, that's out of my scope. Like, I don't do PR. We have to bring on an external agency. But notice how PR professionals all the time are inundated with really core marketing driven questions. And so I think there's also a lot of confusion in the industry right now, where the lines are a little bit blurred. And, there are some PR professionals that have sort of dropped PR from their title and changed their company name entirely and said, no, we do full service PR and marketing, right? And that's their decision. Other PR professionals are saying, no, we really just do PR. We don't necessarily do sales. We don't do, any sort of direct marketing or anything like that. That's a separate scope. And then, so it's just, have you seen the same thing in the market?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo similar sentiments. I mean, I haven't found many marketing directors, first of all, that have an appetite for PR. I mean, they're going to want to lean into an agency or an outside resource for that because, they just don't have the experience acumen. I mean, and I think there's also something that's a little bit intimidating about PR and about, the challenge of getting quality coverage and getting into the right outlets and making those things happen. It's not something that, on the surface, it may seem like, all right, it's just connections and it's just, just connecting two parties together and getting a story featured, but it's just not that simple. And so exactly. I think that certainly most marketing directors would outsource it. And I think on the PR side, you're right that, there's a lot of, marketing questions and things like that asked out of PR professionals that maybe that's not the most fair situation. I don't know the solution to that. Maybe it's just education on both parts to, know how PR and marketing really works together and exactly. how to maximize it from a marketing perspective, maximize it from a PR perspective.
I do think they could work together very nicely. And I think ideally PR and marketing should complement each other. So if you have a CMO working with an external PR agency, that's, I think the best possible solution.
And then in terms of evaluating the results of a PR campaign, how do you evaluate the results? I mean, do you look at, okay, we got X amount of hits or we got X amount of, site traffic or lead gen, or like, what is the way that you can evaluate success?
So you can look at all of those things. I mean, one is, has there been an increase in engagement? Has there been an increase in traffic from the press articles back through the site, and you can look at that obviously through analytics or Search Console or anything else. Another big one is there an increase in brand preference for this brand? And the biggest one is, I look at, when I'm working with a client, I look at it almost like as a piece of art, right? Like, so I want to say like, okay, here's sort of this blank slate, and now I want to create it in that way. After we're done with them, when we go to Google News, like every single thing on there you're going to see is a new news article. I look at that as this person is well branded now. And that is not sort of a one-time type thing. That's why I don't think that anyone who offers to do PR for 1 month or this short-term sort of stint, like that's not really going to build your brand. The goal of PR, in my opinion, is to change the conversation about you, control the narrative, control the conversation, and be able to create a brand with it. And everyone loves to sort of use this buzzword phrase of personal branding. And I suppose I have my own thoughts about that, but really at the core, that's what it is. And so that's one way that I would measure it. And again, that's sort of a, how do you measure the value of brand equity, right? That in itself can be sort of fluffy, or it can actually be really substantial because it can lead to new other opportunities, like being invited for international keynotes, being on the circuit speaker, getting more involved with publishing and trade publications in your industry. All of these things are intangible. They're just, or are you going to be hired as a brand ambassador for something because you now have more visibility? Can you hire someone else for your practice because they heard you on a podcast? I mean, how do you put the price on that? Mm-hmm. I haven't figured out how, but I know it is worth quite a lot more than you're paying a PR firm.
Yeah, certainly. So let's go back to personal branding a bit. I mean, that's been more of my experience, personal experience with PR has been on the personal branding side and doing much of it myself and getting published a couple hundred times and podcasts and show and trying to just get my name out there and build up credibility. And it's worked. I mean, it shifts the conversations that I'm having. It shifts the narrative. There's definitely more respect from prospects and clients. I mean, I definitely can see how it can impact our business, but I'd be curious for brands as well as agencies. I talk to a lot of agencies and, they're looking at promoting themselves and sales, marketing, new biz, PR, the whole 9 yards. And oftentimes, they're really focusing on their agency owners and their personal brands from a PR perspective more than, the actual brand of the agency and getting them out there and kind of their personal brands become, sales funnels in a way that bring opportunities into the mothership. But what are your thoughts on personal branding and its importance to a PR campaign? And, if you have maybe limited dollars to spend, you're an emerging brand, would you invest it in the owner of the company and thought leadership and building up their personal brand, or would you invest it in PR for the company itself to get the word out there about the product? And like, is there kind of one that means more? Is there an order of operation?
That's a great question. Yeah, sense? So I think I'd probably start with personal branding and then go over to the corporate branding. Although, however, you need to have that corporate brand sort of set in stone if the personal brand is going to go out into the market. Right? So they really sort of have to work together. I think, this notion, PR has changed a lot in terms of personal branding for PR agency owners. So I think in your area, it's a little bit different, right? Because your vertical isn't PR, but you still see a lot of PR people who are agency owners who are hesitant to put themselves out there. They're hesitant because of, is there going to be backlash? What are my clients going to say? My clients hire me to get them out there. And here I am as an agency owner putting myself out there.
How do you deal with that? You're all over TV. I mean, how do you deal with that?
It's a great question. And I'm glad we're talking about this topic. I constantly go back and forth with it. A lot of times I feel like sometimes I say, I almost hold myself back a little bit because I go, oh, maybe it's not going to look good if I'm on air yet again. How is this going to make a client feel? But I've recently made a shift and said, no, this is actually who I am. I can't change who I am. This is part of me. This is part of my career. I've worked really hard for this. I've built it up over 12 years. Right. And so I have two core things. One is I am a agency owner of a PR firm. My job is to brand my clients and get them press. And my second job is that I'm an on-air commentator and a media contributor. So I comment on things that are happening in the news. And so I can't necessarily put that on hold because I'm afraid that that's going to upset someone. Because here's what happens. If I do that, then I'm going to become resentful, and I'm not going to be as great as I possibly can be for my clients. And so I've learned recently not to hold back. And I've recently been making very different choices with the types of clients that I take on. And so in a way, I think it can be helpful, right? Because there's so much stuff out there about me online. So if you're thinking about working with me, it's not a secret, right? Look, you can see my views, you can watch my segments, you know what you're getting, who you're getting, where I am, what I'm doing, right? It's all sort of out there.
Well, it says a lot as well, because it's not only the subject matter expertise that you're talking about in these interviews and segments, but it's the fact that you're sitting there talking about it as well. I mean, you're practicing what you preach. I mean, you immediately look at the video like, okay, well, this person obviously can get me this same type of coverage. I mean, that's because I'm watching you, do it. So it's like, it adds up.
I will say this. I will also say that the more I become comfortable with this and settle into it, I realize that that's tapping into your power, right? It is powerful to have breaking news, real world, behind the scenes experience. I've been on national TV segments more than 100 times at this point, and I'm, 32 now? Like that's substantial for someone my age. So if I keep at that trajectory, like that just makes me a better PR person. There are so many people in this field that have actually never even stepped foot in a newsroom behind the scenes, right? So when I write things, the other day I wrote a segment and not a segment, I wrote a pitch and for a client, and the journalist afterwards said, "Oh, I love getting your pitches, Chris."
What is the number one PR mistake that companies make?
One is that they just don't answer the questions properly, right? Or they answer the questions that they think someone should ask rather than what the actual questions are. So you have to really, like, if it's Harrow and the reporter has 5 questions, like answer all 5. That doesn't mean answer 3 and drop 2. It means answer all 5. And it means giving complete answers to all of them. Give them more, not less. Give them information to pull from and make it helpful. The other thing.
That sounds like basic following instructions.
Yeah, but people don't do that. 9 out of 10 times, people don't get quoted because they don't follow instructions. And they don't answer the questions, or they send a pitch about themselves or their client and not actually what they're asking for. And again, I was a reporter for Observer, a columnist for them for 2 years. So I was on the other end of pitches too. So that also really helped me see like some things I would get from other PR agencies. I would be like, oh my God, I can't believe, like, if only the client saw, like, they're really like paying someone for this pitch, like. Or you want to make it a seamless sort of process. The other thing is, I think that you should really know what people are sending out on your behalf. There are a lot of PR people who will say, no, it's under a veil. My pitches are proprietary. I won't share it with you. But here's the thing. If you work with clients you trust, you should be comfortable enough sharing certain things like a pitch with them because they can make it better. Maybe you're missing something. And it's about them. At the end of the day, I believe it's their work product, right? And so it doesn't mean you should give away your secret sauce or your media contacts or anything like that. But, if someone wrote a pitch for me, I'd want to see it and say, wait, you're leaving XYZ out. Yeah. So I think that we should be working together to help each other in that regard.
In that same vein, should PR agencies, is there a way to work with their clients in a way that helps kind of educate them more along the process and gives that kind of input to guide, okay, like you're going to need to follow the instructions, or we're going to share this with you to collaborate and make sure it's the best? I mean, is that happening enough, or is it? It
never happens. It needs
the PR agencies doing their own thing and, reporting on monthly metrics on a monthly basis or something like that. I mean, this is
we could do a whole show just on this topic, because I think that, I have a friend who 30-year PR veteran in the industry. And the first question that he asks a prospect is, have you ever worked with a PR firm before? They say, no, we won't work with them. And what you are touching on is precisely the reason why. There is such a steep learning curve in PR. And what you have is PR people who are working in this sort of 24/7 breaking news, understanding what reporter wants environment all the time. And then you have clients that are thrust into this, many who have never worked with a PR person before. And they're like, oh my God, I had no idea. Like, what do you mean? Like, you need 24/7 access to me? Or what do you mean you're going to text me at 11:30 at night and need this answer to this question now in 30 minutes, right? It becomes this very demanding environment that's very different than maybe if you've hired a marketing firm, right? They're not operating like that. Maybe you're not going to hear from them after 6 o'clock. I don't know. But a PR person, you could still be hearing from them at midnight because a reporter needs something and they need it now. And so that trickles down not only into the person you're working with, but even their family is saying, what is going on? Why is this person contacting you at all? Like what? And so I don't think that PR is just a learning curve for the client. I think it's just learning curve for everyone involved with that client that they are touch, right? So that goes to their office manager, their employees, their family, so everyone knows what's happening. And no, I think that part rarely does happen. So I think it would be great. I started internally working on trying to fix this with a media training book for clients. And I found that what I'd ideally like to do is spend, month one working with them on that. But of course, it's very hard to do that because clients don't want to do that.
Okay. I wanted to ask about press releases, just because I've seen this come up in groups that I'm in, and is there any value nowadays in a press release? Is there value in, if you're not hiring a PR agency, going and submitting it through PR Web or one of these platforms yourself and picking the top SEO package and all that good stuff? Like, is it going to get you anywhere? Because my experience, I've done some press releases on my own, but I've always used them to get more press from the Business Journal or other publications, and use that as kind of ammunition for that deeper conversation, and not so much the results from the press release itself.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of debate in the PR industry about this. And so I think if you're doing like an acquisition or some big company announcement, something really major, I think there's still value in a press release. I don't think it's a huge component of an ongoing PR campaign. I think most of the time we're spending time pitching and not writing releases. But again, if you have some major news that you want to report, an acquisition, anything like that, that's what I would use a press release for. But in terms of the ongoing PR campaign, I would say focus on pitching.
Gotcha. And then do free media query services, do they really work?
They do work. Yeah, we see great. It works if you work it, right? So you need to know how to work it better in terms of media. So it's not just that they exist and therefore you're going to get press. I always say it's called earned media for a reason. Earn it. And so help a reporter out. HARO means help a reporter out. What does that mean? You have to help them out. That means drop what you're doing now and help them. And so, I don't think people realize that that's how you get, some of these opportunities. It doesn't mean answer them when you feel like it next week. It means you have to do a lot of work and probably drop everything you're doing to give them what they want now. That's your end of the bargain in order to earn the coverage.
How do you handle that? In your role owning a PR agency, when maybe you have 3 opportunities right in front of you, how do you kind of select and figure out this gets my time and then this gets my time, and then, sure, that delegation process, prioritization process?
So I actually just wrote a media relations guide. We should share the link too, which is really helpful. It has a criteria of what I look at for these. So for clients, for example, we will look at the outlet type. So is it a national outlet or is it anonymous? If it's anonymous, we're most likely going to skip it because it's too big of a gamble. Then I look at the deadline. Do I think that I can get the answer from the client before the deadline? If I don't think that, then I'm not going to pitch it. I'll let them know about the opportunity, but that's always really important. And then I look at the criteria. Is my client the best possible source for what they're looking for, right? So maybe there's a query where there's 5 health questions, but they really want, a nurse and not the type of doctor that I have who can answer the question. So that's something else I'll look at. So, I go through this internal checklist.
All right. And then we only have a few minutes left, but I want to cover a little more ground. How do you craft a pitch that gets the attention of journalists in a nutshell?
In a nutshell, first you want to research other things that reporter has written, understand their beat. Maybe their beat's changed. You don't know. Maybe they're not even out at that outlet anymore. So look on Muck Rack or look on Twitter to see what they are writing about. Next, have a really great subject line and be sure to spell their name properly and address it to them. In the first, is that your phone or my phone?
I think it's my phone.
Oh, it's my phone. And I'm trying to shut the phone off.
Yeah.
So in the first sentence, I would mention something that they have written about previously. But again, I think the best way to pitch someone is if you can really add value. So if you think do you have research you want to share with them? Did you commission a study that you think the findings would be fascinating? So let's say, for example, you're in the social media industry, which I am in. So if I were doing a pitch for someone in social media right now, that pitch would probably be on, oh, I just watched the Dem debates, and big tech social media was a major topic, right? So like that's the other thing. You can't be in social media and not watch that debate and not know what's going on in the world, right? So if you're pitching journalists the day after that happened, and that's the big social media story, but then you're talking about Instagram like removing the following tab, like what do you think people are writing about that day? Like, yes, the Instagram removing the following tab was relevant, but now
Yesterday.
the Dem debate has, yes, that has trumped it. But also, the other thing is, are you looking for national media, or are you looking for trade media? If you want trade media, yeah, them removing the following tab is still going to be more important. But if you want national, you need to follow the national news. And you can't just try and take trade stuff and make it fit into this box where it's not going to fit into it, because that's not going in national news. In fact, I haven't seen a single news story on that. And I know, because I know what I get asked to talk about. And if there is a choice between Instagram removing the following tab versus this is what was said in the Dem debate, what do you think?
And then do you ever find yourself like stressed out, overwhelmed with just kind of by having to read the news and watch the news and just be in touch with everything going on to, be able to do your job the best that you can? I mean, is it ever just, because sometimes, I used to be a big news junkie myself and spent hours per day just reading about everything going on in the world. And then it got to a point where it's like, this is just overwhelming and I can't control so many things that, I just want to kind of limit my intake of that information. But for you, you've got to have your finger on the pulse and you have to know what's going on. So how do you manage kind of the stress and clutter of all the stuff that's going into your brain?
I try and read the news at different strategic times and throughout the day. And one way that I manage this is we've tried to specialize more in my agency right now and working more with healthcare, PR, and medical clients, because that means that there's less verticals, right? That I am now study. Yes, exactly. So I think that has been a huge help in regards to this. I think the most challenging part for me, just in terms of my own career, is probably, someone's sort of saying at 11 p.m. at night, are you available tomorrow morning? Can you do this hit at 5 a.m., which means I'm waking up at 2 a.m. and a car at 3 a.m. And so it's like a lot of that becomes definitely very stressful. And then that full next day can become, I'm running an agency for the next day. So I'm doing this hit and finishing at 6 a.m.
I've thought about that when I've seen your segments, and I'm like, she's probably, getting up at 2:00 in the morning and then having a day after that. And that has to be taxing. You've got to be, there's exhilaration with it because that you're, it's a great opportunity and you have that platform. And so obviously I'm sure you're grateful for it and you get energy from it, but on the other hand, it does take a toll, I'm sure, as well.
Yeah, I definitely think it's sort of in terms of like cortisol or adrenaline or any of those things, you're sort of in the cycle of crashing up and down all the time, right? And then you're sort of dealing with clients throughout the day, and then the news cycle that you have to manage for them, and then getting them interviews and quotes in the middle of all of this. So it's a lot. It's definitely a challenging route to take, but I guess I thrive in it.
And then this is a fun question. How can you spot a real PR agency from a fake PR agency?
Anyone that can guarantee you coverage, I think, is not legitimate. You can't guarantee coverage unless someone is paying off the contributor or producer, which no one legit would do. Right. And so I think that's the number one way. Like if someone goes, I'm going to guarantee you that I can get you like 3 national hits in 2 weeks, like I would not believe that. And so again, I can say that if anyone is guaranteeing coverage in traditional PR firms, I still think that it's something to really look at. Like, because for example, I couldn't guarantee coverage. How would I guarantee coverage? It doesn't matter how strong my relationships are.
It's like an SEO agency guaranteeing the number 1 spot for your keyword. It's like, yes, you can do that and maybe you're going to hit that, but like you actually can't guarantee that because Google controls the search.
Exactly. Just like Google controls search, the media controls what media you see.
Right.
And so that's the media. It's not the publicist that controls it. And people need to understand there's a difference.
Yep. Okay. That makes sense. And then last question, why do you believe big, large PR firms rarely deliver the results that smaller PR firms are able to deliver for a fraction of the cost?
I think, one problem is that when you hire these large PR firms, like you're still paying for their overhead. You're paying for the people that are there. Like when you have like smaller, scrappier firms, I believe you get like this tremendous value from them, right? Because what you're paying them for is not for all this extra stuff you're really just paying them for their labor and their time, their talent, and their thought leadership. As opposed to anytime you're working with a much larger agency, you're going to pay for the person, but also a lot of other expenses that that agency needs in order to operate. So I think that's a major, major difference. And I still think that people, when they are looking at hiring firms and in the sort of bidding process, sometimes they get very excited if they look on someone's site and see, oh, all of these major, shiny, big brands, right? But how is that really relevant? Sometimes people keep these major brands on their site and then don't update it. So like, how does that help you? Like, the end of the day, you need to look at who is really getting the results and what are they charging for that? And can you get those results from a smaller firm for a fraction of the cost? And I say, yes, you can.
I agree. I mean, we've, from a matchmaking perspective again, and with Agency Match, we focus on small to mid-size agencies, matching them with mid-size to Fortune 1000s, because there's just more value far and wide from small to mid-size agencies. And oftentimes you're dealing with more senior people. You have more transparency, more direct access. There's less of the dog and pony, less of the show and the office.
The bait and switch.
I mean, to me, when I go to the big agency with the really fancy office, I'm just looking around like, oh, this is where the money's going. Like, this is where, I mean, that's, and I would imagine, clients need to think that way as well. Like, this is where you're paying for, the glorification of the pedigreed PR agency, when in many ways you look at smaller agencies and they're going to put a lot more skin in the game and I think be a lot more, capable of driving results because they're going to be a lot more dedicated. You're not just going to be a small client to them. Like, you're going to be one of their main clients, their primary focuses. So
I agree.
All right. Well, we covered a lot of ground and want to wrap it up, make it short and sweet for our listeners, viewers. Anything you want to add? Anything we missed? Any question that I didn't ask that I should have?
I think this is great. And then if anyone wants more information, I would just say that our site is rubymediagroup.com or chrisruby.com.
Appreciate the time spent this afternoon, and thanks for coming on the show.
Perfect. Thanks for having me.